Here. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajaka Ashtotar Tata Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajaka Ashtotar Tata Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. All right, let me get myself together here. Brought all kinds of paraphernalia for recording. They must have had some other engagement going on. It's all right.
I had headphones and they were waving at me, but I thought they were just saying hi. Maybe they were trying to tell me something.
It's all right. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On this 5th day of July 2023 in San Diego, reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 18 entitled Conclusion, the Perfection of Renunciation. Text number 40 on page 685. Okay. Na tad asti prativyam va divideveshu va punaha sattvam prakatijair muktam yadebhi syat tribhir gunahi natadasti prativyam va divideveshu va punaha sattvam prakatijair muktam yadebi syatibir gunai natadasti prativyang va divideveshu va punaha sattvam prakatijair muktam yadebi syatibir gunai natadasti prativyang va divideveshu va punaha sattvam prakatijair muktam yadebhi syatibir gunai. Go ahead. Natadasti prativyang va divideveshu va punaha sattvam prakatijair muktam yadebi syat tribhir gunai. Natadasti prativyang va divideveshu va punaha sattvam prakatijair muktam yadebi syatibir gunai. No? You want to try it?
Sure.
Go ahead. Natadasti prativyang va divideveshu va punaha sattvam prakatijair muktam yadebi syatibir gunai. Natadasti prativyang va divideveshu va punaha sattvam prakatijair muktam yadebi syatibir gunai. Na, not that asti there is prativyam on the earth, va or divi in the higher planetary system, deveshu amongst the demigods, va or punaha again sattvam existence, prakatijai born of material nature, muktam liberated, yet that ebihi from the influence of these, syat is tribihi three gunai modes of material nature. Translation. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, there is no being existing, either here or among the demigods in the higher planetary systems, which is freed from these three modes born of material nature. Purport. The Lord here summarizes the total influence of the three modes of material nature all over the universe. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So, going back to text 18, Krishna has gone through various elements of our existence and described them in the three different modes of nature. Knowledge in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And let's see, action in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Actors, those who act in the mode, the worker in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And happiness in the mode of goodness, passion, ignorance, and dharma. So these things are all intrinsic to our living in this world. In other words, Krishna mentioned in this chapter 5 different elements of action. The super soul, the endeavor, the worker, the senses, the effort, I think, is something like that, determination. So all of them are controlled by the modes of nature, except for the super soul, of course. And he's telling us that this is a tremendous entanglement, because unless you're Krishna conscious, you're going to be going from one mode to the other, and they act, as explained nicely in the 7th chapter. These gunai also means rope. Daiviyesha gunamahi mama maya duratya. That this divine nature of mine, composed of the three modes of material nature, is impossible to cross over on one's own. But by surrendering unto me, one can easily cross beyond them. It's such an important verse. And so Krishna is winding up his instructions now. He's coming to the final conclusion. And he's pointing out how Krishna's consciousness, surrendering unto me, is necessary if one wants to pass out of this tremendous entanglement of material nature, which keeps us bound life after life in this temporary world of suffering. Dukkalayam ashashvatam. So let's go on. All right. Text 41. And now he's going to give the different qualities of the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras. Brahmana Kshatriya Visham Shudranam cha parantapa Karmani prabhibhaktani Swabhava prabhavaya. Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras are distinguished by the qualities born of their own natures in accordance with the material modes, O chastiser of the enemy. Shamodamastapak shaucham Shantirajvam evacha Jnanam vijnanam astikyam Brahma karma swabhavajam Karma peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmins work. Shauryam tejo tatirdakshyam Yuddhe chapya palayanam Dhanamishvara bhavascha Chatram karma swabhavajam. Heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership are the natural qualities of work for the Kshatriyas. Krishigo rakshavanijam Vaishyakarma swabhavajam Paricharyatmakam karma Shudrasyapi swabhavajam. Farming, cow protection, and business are the natural work for the Vaishyas, and for the Shudras there are labor and service to the others. Svei svei karman yaviditak Sangsiddhim labate naraha Swakarma naratak siddhim Yata vindati tachrinu. By following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. Now please hear from me how this can be done. Yatak pravittir bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam sakarmanatam abhyarcha siddhim bindati manavaha. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all-pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. Yeah, just move it over. Move the whole thing over. Okay, purport. As stated in the 15th chapter, all living beings, we're on page 688. As stated in the 15th chapter, all living beings are fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. Thus, the Supreme Lord is the beginning of all living entities. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra, Janmadyasya Yataha. The Supreme Lord is therefore the beginning of life of every living entity. And as stated in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord, by his two energies, his external energy and internal energy, is all-pervading. Therefore, one should worship the Supreme Lord with his energies. Generally, the Vaishnava devotees worship the Supreme Lord with his internal energy. His external energy is a perverted reflection of the internal energy. The external energy is a background, but the Supreme Lord, by the expansion of his plenary portion as a Paramatma, is situated everywhere. He is the super-soul of all demigods, all human beings, all animals, everywhere. One should therefore know that as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, one has his duty to render service unto the Supreme. Everyone should be engaged in devotional service to the Lord in full Krishna consciousness. That is recommended in this verse. Everyone should think that he is engaged in a particular type of occupation by Rishikesha, the master of the senses. And by the result of the work in which one is engaged, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, should be worshipped. If one thinks always in this way, in full Krishna consciousness, then, by the grace of the Lord, he becomes fully aware of everything. That is the perfection of life. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita 12:7, Tesham aham samudharta. The Supreme Lord himself takes charge of delivering such a devotee. That is the highest perfection of life. In whatever occupation one may be engaged, if he serves the Supreme Lord, he will achieve the highest perfection. Okay. So this text 46, the translation may be a little bit difficult to understand. What's be meaning here is that the Lord is the source of all beings, okay, and is all pervading. A person can attain perfection by performing his own work, and thus by that work worshiping the Lord. That's the whole idea. In other words, everyone in this world, every human being, it has a certain configuration of these modes of nature, which are dominant in personality. And according to those modes, actually you can determine if one is a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. The Brahmins are generally the mode of ignorance, the mode of goodness, sorry. It's a slip-up. Okay, mode of goodness. And then you have the Kshatriyas who are primarily in the modes of passion, the Vaishyas who are combination, modes of passion and ignorance, and the Shudras who are mostly ignorance. So each one has a role to play. And it's not that the Shudras, because they're mostly a mode of ignorance, they can also progress. If they're if they're in the varnashram system, this is the occupational side of the varnashram system, the varna side is described here. Then, if the Brahmins are actually being Brahmins and the Kshatriyas are Kshatriyas, meaning they're following the instruction of the Brahmins are learned, they're pure, they're following these qualities. What is it? Peaceful, self-controlled, austere, tolerant, pure, clean and pure in all levels, tolerant, honest, and if they are endowed with knowledge and wisdom, realized knowledge, then that will be exhibited in the work that they do, in their personality. In other words, they will exhibit these qualities in what they do. It's not just you claim that they're brahminical, but this karma and guna actually show, not to birth. So then the Kshatriyas, they need to follow the advice of the Brahmins in a proper society. Otherwise, the Kshatriyas can easily get out of hand. Right? Start to... Huh? Yeah, although we don't really have very pure Kshatriyas, but exactly. But actually it's Vaishyas, it's the billionaires who run everything. Anyway, it's all upside down, corrupted. But this is explained nicely in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 2nd chapter, 1st canto. Atak pumbu dvida shesta varnashrama vibhagasa swanachitasa dharmasa sangsiddhi haditoshanam. It's exactly pertinent to this. Is that Dvija Shresha, this is Sutta Goswami addressing the assembly of the greatest sages and devotees who gathered in Naimisharanya. Swanachidasa dharmasa sangsiddhi haritoshan. The perfection of the dharma, or the varnashram dharma, is when everyone is working to satisfy Hari. In other words, the prime goal in here, in this, the Shudras, when they're acting to perform devotional service by doing their duty, they're on the same level transcendentally as the Brahmins are. It's just that they have different qualities that they're working. So this is the ideal, and this is what Prabhupada tried to set up in ISKCON. He said, I haven't really completed my mission because I haven't set up Varnashram. But the devotees are meant to show by example how, keeping Krishna in the center, everyone can be satisfied in their role that they play. It's not that the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas, the Brahmins, are lord it over the lower classes and dominate and for personal gain. It's a corruption. When Krishna is the center, I like to give you the example of a kirtan. Right? So there's a nice kirtan going on, and somebody is brahminical, he's got a higher IQ, and so who cares? The Shudras are dancing and the Vaishyas are dancing, and you don't consider I'm a Vaishya. You think I'm a Vaishnav. That's the thing, isn't it? And Prabhupada said this is the real platform of equality and fraternity, United Nations. He landed in New York, and they actually went up to, if you know the history, early on in the history of it, soon after it was founded, because there's the history, there were two major social currents that are going on. One was the Vietnam War, and the other was the Civil Rights Movement. And so the devotees who joined, were all conscious of those, and so Prabhupada had a brilliant idea, let's go and have a kirtan up at the United Nations. So they went up there, I don't know, maybe 25 total devotees in the whole movement. It's the first few months. So it's 1966. And they started a kirtan, and cops came out and said, no. You can't have a loud, no demonstrations up here, So they then sat down and did japa for a while. They still chanted. But the whole point is that Prabhupada said, what is the real effect of this United Nations? The whole idea, it grew out of World War II, the horror of all the people killed, and it was just horrible. Okay, let's see if we can prevent war. That was the whole idea. So they had the Security Council, General Assembly, where they meet and hash things out, and hopefully it didn't really work, because so many wars have come since then. Not world wars, thank God, but that could happen at any time. So Prabhupada said the flags are simply increasing because everyone is thinking, oh, I'm an American, I'm a German, I'm an Italian, I'm a Russian, I'm a Chinese, They're still identifying on the material platform, which means that there's going to be distinctions on the basis of property and power and all of these different things. So that's not the way. ISKCON, he said, after the movement grew and you had thousands of devotees, they would come to Mayapur and you could see all the different races, you could see all the different nationalities dancing and chanting together. This is the real United Nations. And today it's even more pronounced. I mean, after the Soviet Union dissolved in the beginning of the 90s, suddenly it broke open, and you could travel out of the former Soviet Union, Russia. And I wasn't there, for the first visitation of maybe a couple of dozen Russian devotees who came down from Mayapur. It was a big event, because So this is the real United Nation. How? By everyone identifying himself as a Vaishnava. We're pure spirit souls. We're all wearing different clothes. You know, the analogy of the gross and subtle body as the coat and shirt. Where, well, you know, I just have a shirt on, it's getting warm, you know. But you have a coat, and that's the outer, that's your gross body. But your subtle body is the shirt. Okay, so we're wearing different shirts and coats. Does that really, you're going to have a fight about that? You know? In other words, it's a complete mistake. It's a total illusion to identify ourselves with the gross and subtle bodies, and that's the first lesson of Krishna consciousness. And when you act on that platform of realization, using your senses and your mind, you know, your external bodies, and the service of the Lord, then it all becomes transcendentalized, and you feel yourself to be a spirit soul, and you act on that platform. So that's what this verse 46 is so important, that anyone, right, any human being, this man means human, as has been pointed out, can attain perfection by performing his or her own work according to the station in life, and through that work worshiping the Lord. And mostly you worship with the fruits of your labor, right? In other words, you have direct service, like you can come to the temple, you can clean the temple, you can offer something. But whatever you do, you feel, oh, Krishna is really the proprietor, and let me offer that. And in that sense, we all have a central goal in mind and a central focus, which is Krishna. And because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you feel the reciprocation. He's in your heart. It's not some nebulous idea or some charity, you know, which you can also feel, oh, we're doing good for the people, you know. But that's temporary. That can't give everyone satisfaction. But anyone can, whatever you have in your hand, you know, whatever you can give. Some of you don't have anything. Okay, you come, you can sweep up the patio, you can, you know, everyone can chant Hare Krishna, and in this way perform the most important service, because it's the Yuga Dharma, and please Krishna, and feel welcome within the devotee society. And when, you know, the whole world is like that, which it once was, you know, at one point, then the demigods are happy. You know, you don't have all this crazy weather, climate change. I mean, that you read about that in the Bhagavatam, how when Parikshit was king, when Yudhishthira was king, when you had these great Vaishnava leaders, then the demigods were all happy, and you got enough rain at the right time. You know, you didn't. Nature was also abundant. You know, and now you wonder what's going on. You know, nature is becoming disturbed by what's happening, and it's creating huge heat waves and floods, and the poles are melting. You know, you all read about this. And they don't seem to be able to stop it, because if you have some material reason, okay, well, we have a material reason. You stop your burning your fossil fuels, but we'll continue burning ours, and we'll prosper. You know, like that. So it's very difficult. Krishna consciousness is the only solution to this. Okay, any questions or comments on this purport? You may have noticed Prabhupada is speeding along in his 18th chapter. No purports. Could have been long ones. But the key verse, he gave a nice, substantial purport. And from now on, I think we'll see extensive purports, because these verses are all becoming conclusive to the whole Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so the next verse, it repeats, the first line is a repeat from an earlier chapter, so it's important. Shreyan swadharmo viguna padadharmat swanustitat Swabhava niyatam karma kurvanapnoti kilbisham. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. Purport. One's occupational duty is prescribed in the Bhagavad Gita. As already discussed in previous verses, the duties of a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra are prescribed according to their particular modes of nature. One should not imitate another's duty. A man who is by nature attracted to the kind of work done by Shudras should not artificially claim to be a Brahman, although he may have been born into a Brahman family. In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable if performed in the service of the Supreme Lord. The occupational duty of a Brahman is certainly in the mode of goodness. But if a person is not by nature in the mode of goodness, he should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahman. For a Kshatriya or administrator, there are so many abominable things. A Kshatriya has to be violent to kill his enemies, and sometimes a Kshatriya has to tell lies for the sake of diplomacy. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs, but a Kshatriya is not supposed to give up his occupational duty and try to perform the duties of a Brahman. One should act to satisfy the Supreme Lord. For example, Arjuna was a Kshatriya. He was hesitating to fight the other party. But if such fighting is performed for the sake of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there need be no fear of degradation. In the business field also, sometimes a merchant has to tell so many lies to make a profit. If he does not do so, there can be no profit. Sometimes the merchant says, "Oh, my dear customer, for you I am making no profit." But one should know that without profit, the merchant cannot exist. Therefore, it should be taken as a simple lie if a merchant says that he is not making a profit. But the merchant should not think that because he is engaged in an occupation in which the telling of lies is compulsory, he should give up his profession and pursue the profession of a Brahman. That is not recommended. Whether one is a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Shudra doesn't matter, if he serves by his work the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even Brahmins who perform different types of sacrifice sometimes must kill animals because sometimes animals are sacrificed in such ceremonies. Similarly, if a Kshatriya engaged in his own occupation kills an enemy, there is no sin incurred. In the 3rd chapter, these matters have been clearly and elaborately explained. Every man should work for the purpose of yajna, or for Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anything done for personal sense gratification is the cause of bondage. The conclusion is that everyone should be engaged according to the particular mode of nature he has acquired, and he should decide to work only to serve the supreme cause of the Supreme Lord. So practically speaking, in the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, there's no question of performing a yajna and killing an animal, killing a horse. You know, there's Ashwamedha yajnas. We don't do that. It's not necessary. The yajnas for the ages, Sankirtan. Nobody is harmed. Everybody is benefited. And it is the quickest path back to Godhead. Certainly in the larger society, it may be true that these things are going on. But Srila Prabhupada set up his society in such a way that there's so many duties to perform for maintenance of the temple. There are so many duties to perform for preaching, which everyone is invited to participate in, especially through Harinam Sankirtan. And of course, there are those who are able to distribute books. Prabhupada said everyone should learn that art. And they're completely harmless. There's only good involved. And it's purifying for the person who does it, those who receive it. Everything is auspicious. So that's what we're meant to do. And we should find a way that we can perform a regular service for the Lord. We may have our own occupation, we have so many things to do, but reserve Saturday mornings for coming and helping to clean the temple or something like that. Do some practical service. All of that is very purifying and auspicious. And I always point out that, well, what's the immediate result of that? You're not getting paid, like that. But you're getting the most valuable thing, which is your heart is being purified of what? Of abhadras, of different material desires, addictions, fears, grudges. All of these different things are being cleansed away by service, especially chanting. And the chanting of Hare Krishna can accompany sweeping the patio and chanting Hare Krishna. It's perfect engagement. Cooking, and in the kitchen, cutting up. Anyone can cut up vegetables. So that's what this movement is all about. From the beginning, you're on the transcendental platform if you take part wholeheartedly, and it's all auspicious. Even if, let's be honest, there have been thousands of people who come through this movement. They spent a year or less, or more, several years. But through the circumstances or whatever, they've left. They're not practicing them, maybe not practicing wholeheartedly, full time like they were, but they're still maintaining them. But there's no loss.
There's no loss, and there's no diminution. In the famous verse, we can all chant together. Neha bikramanajosti patyabhayam vidyate swapamapasiddham satrayate mahato bayat. This is way back in chapter 2. It's interesting that, near the beginning of the Gita, Krishna gives this very encouraging verse, which says, in this endeavor, Krishna consciousness, there's no loss or diminution. Whatever you do, coming to Bhagavad Gita class 5 times, maybe, total in your lifetime, that's all in your bank account. Whatever you chanted, whatever you heard, that's all in your bank account. There's no loss, there's no diminution. And most amazingly, even a little advancement on this path protects one from the most fearful type of danger, which is losing the human form of life. We're all going to die. We're all going to get another body, but it will not be an animal body, a plant body. No. Just from doing a little devotional service, you're assured. Now, we don't want to plan like that. Say, well, okay, I'm all set. No, it's still very painful to take any kind of birth. But at least you get another chance. And you pick up from 5%, 10%, however much you did. Where do you find that on the material sphere? There's like 5 guys who own so much in the world that more than the bottom 50% of the United States population. I don't have to name their names, they're so famous, Billions, they have 100 billion, 50 billion, it's obscene. But all that's going to be taken away. The money, the prestige, the buildings, the influence, everything is gone as soon as they leave. And who knows where they're going, They'll be lucky if they maybe saw a chanting party and they don't have to take it. But the point is that it's crazy. To struggle for that and somehow idolize these people. And, I take a walk every day. And inevitably I pass by this corner store. Said, oh, CA lottery. It's up to $146 million or whatever it may be, Oh, maybe I'll be the lucky one. People have been playing that for years. They put in thousands of dollars in it. They haven't won a thing. It's one of the 4 regular principles. No gambling. And that's the dream, to keep you dreaming about some kind of success or happiness in the future that you can get. But on the material plane, it's not going to happen. There's always, it's all simply an illusory dream. It's a big con job. Somehow, if I get this, I'll be happy. If this person, if they'll dislike me or whatever. But it's dukkhalayam ashashvatam. The ashashvatam is very important. It's temporary, and it's full of misery. And part of the misery is that it's temporary. Whatever you have, oh my God, it's being taken away. But for a devotee of Krishna, no, it's not being taken away. It's keeping you going, and you'll be, in the next life, the best thing is you get born into a family of devotees, from childhood you're trained up. It's like we see this wonderful family, Purushottama and his wife Priya and the little Gaurangi is growing up, Huh? She was on the Harinam, and I'm sure she was one of the stars on that Harinam. And then the other family, we have Gaur Keshava and his family. The kids are being homeschooled, and you can tell it. They're so bright, and it's a joy to see how it can be done, even in this world. So that's Krishna is making that point. If through your work, whatever your station in life may be, you're worshiping the Lord, then you can achieve success. And now he's going to wind up. Now we're really getting to the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, and many of the verses will be memorable. They're all memorable, but especially memorable. All right, so did we do 48? Yes, go ahead. What happened? We got it? Oh, you brought it out. Okay.
So I think you said this, but I just wanted to clarify. So
Probably a mistake. Go ahead.
I hope not. Okay, so like when a chanting party goes out and people hear, and maybe they take a flyer or a cookie or whatever. So all those people are guaranteed a human birth next time? Is that how it works?
Definitely. Definitely.
Maybe we should do it more then.
We're coming up in the morning class, which you hear many of the morning classes. Chichiketu, there's a whole story which I won't get into, but he's a great devotee now. He's got instruction from Narada Muni in this prayer. Oh, I got to chant this prayer for you. This is the last of the prayers. You didn't hear it, I think, but you know the verse. And it's quite dramatic because he's got Narada Muni and Angura. There's a little child who was poisoned, who's brought back to life, and he preaches to him about whose child am I really? Because he wanted to have a son. He had a son. He was poisoned by the co-wives. It's all this dramatic scene. So now he's been given this wonderful prayer by Narada Muni to chant, and in 7 days he gets the darshan of the Lord. That's a new record. I mean, Dhruva it took like 6 months, which is amazing. and the last verse, it's not even a verse, but I'll just give you a taste of what this is. Om Namo Bhagavate Mahapurushaya Mahanubhavaya Mahavabhuti Patihe Sakala Satvata Padavidnikada Kamala Kudmalo Balada Charanada Vindayugala Padama Padameshtin Namaste. So that, what that last the means is, Om Namo Bhagavate, I offer my hope and obeisance unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Mahanubhavaya, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mahavabhuti Patiye, who is the master of all opulences. And then it describes how he's surrounded in the spiritual world by the best of devotees who are there, and with their lotus bud-like hands, they're massaging his lotus feet. That's the translation. But the massaging is not just ordinary massaging. The word upalalata means caressing and fondling. Yes, you look it up. In other words, they're doing it with love. They're in bliss, just massaging and fondling his lotus feet. And he's reciprocating, So it's interesting because all the prayers have been very kind of, how shall I say, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of all energies, something very official. But now we finally get to the bhakti part, where they're reciprocating and they're perfectly happily glorifying him and being in their position, and it's eternal. So then he then offers a prayer, a glorification, which I think it's his own realization verses. And it's very interesting because you may have noticed that I like to chant these verses. And there's a meter to each one, sometimes a very unusual meter. But these particular verses, I think every single one of them is irregular. There's a regular beat in there. Anyway, we'll get to them. But one of the verses describes, and this is the point I bring it up, that just by hearing one name of Krishna, all your sinful reactions are eradicated. That's what it says. Not just chanting, but here. We know chanting is very, classic, but this is hearing. So isn't that an inducement to go on higher now?
I have a follow-up question then.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. But, okay. But actually this comes up a lot. So you hear the holy name once, and it just eradicates all your sinful activities or
sinful reactions.
Sinful reactions, yes. And then you go the rest of your life not hearing...
hearing all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah. Do you still get a human birth? Like maybe not a good human birth, but like some kind of human birth? Is that how?
Totally. Wow. Get a human birth.
Right, thank you.
That's the greatest danger, is losing the human form of birth. And there's so many verses that describe the rarity of human life and the incredible value of the human life. Having gotten the human form of life, after many, many births in lower species, the human form of life, which alone can give the final goal for the soul. You can actually achieve liberation, go back to Godhead. You can't do it in a cat's and dog's body, One should immediately turnam yate to strive for the ultimate good. Bhakti, for love of God. Nikshayasaya vishayakulasavataks. Because you've already experienced so much sense gratification in different bodies, different human bodies. Punok punascharvata charvananam, again and again chewing the chewed. It hasn't gotten you anything but a whole lot of suffering. So only in human life can we understand these things, attain knowledge that can give us faith in acting in such a way against our animal instincts of the senses, and in this way become purified. Therefore, losing the human form of life is such a tragedy, after having gotten it. So just chanting a little bit or engaging in any kind of devotion assures you of a human birth. But why prolong the agony? You know, let's go back to Godhead in this lifetime. But it's very encouraging that you're on the path, and the Prabhupada says in one lecture, once you give something to Krishna, you can't get out of it. You know, you'll never get out of it. You have to go back to Godhead eventually. Yes?
Just going back to the...
Yeah, hold it until it turns on.
There it is. Okay. So going back to the Varnashram system, I guess I've heard Prabhupada, you know, some of his lectures saying that we're here in this ISKCON, you know, this Krishna consciousness movement to make the Brahmins more Brahmin, more of the intellectual class.
Create Brahmins, right.
So how does it fit in within the temple template or whatever, you know, the system of that has, you know, been built over the last 50 years of this movement? How do we account for somebody with Kshatriya qualities or somebody, you know, with different qualities other than the Brahmin? Is there room for those people with those traits here within the system?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely, I'll tell you one pastime. Way back in it may have been 73 or 74, where I was living in Brooklyn Temple at that time. And we heard about this horrific attack on the New Vrindavan community. I guess it was one biker, you know, his sister, I think, joined the movement or something like that. And he, you know, they heard she was in the temple. I don't know if she even was, but that's what they thought. So during the middle of the Bhagavatam class, I think it was, they drive up, you know, in these loud Harley Davidsons, you know, near the temple, and they get out with guns, with rifles, and the curtains are open. And they point the guns inside. One devotee got shot, not fatally, but he injured his arm. So they meant business, you know. And they took the leader out, Kirtananda Swami. They took him out, and they were threatening to kill him unless he gave the girl back. And I don't even know if they knew where she was. So it was all developing into the most horrific thing. And they saw that the devotees were revering these figures on the altar. So even though they closed the curtains, they said, open those curtains again, you know, and they had the guns. And we heard all this, of course, later. And they took Radharani off the altar, and the devotees were aghast, and they dropped her, and something broke with a big crack. And the main guy who had Kirtananda outside the temple, he freaked out from that noise. And he said, let's get out of here. And he got all the men, and they took off. And so the devotees, Radharani saved us, you know, it was a miraculous thing. But because of that, each temple, especially temples that had a bunch of devotees, which Brooklyn was at that time, he said, okay, we got to find the Kshatriyas and we got to train up, and we're going to have to be like that. Good. And so we had an upstairs, which we called the gallery, which is kind of where the paintings are up there, and we had plays up there and everything. So we had a few guys who, you know, had they were tough guys, and they started training up in martial arts, you know, and it was you know, jiu-jitsu and stuff, karate. And you'd hear them after breakfast, you know, yelling up there. But the problem was there was hardly any scope for them to really exercise there, you know, because the temples weren't being attacked very much. But that was the, you know, so there was some scope for that. And generally, it's not just, you know, fighting, it's administration.
Yes.
They have a charisma, we call. They're natural leaders, you know, and they would come to the top and they would become temple presidents and things like that, and GBC. And so there's scope for that, for certainly. But it's not that those who have those positions are not meant to also develop, they're meant to also study the Shastra and know, you know, like that. But the whole idea, you know, becoming expert in performing all kinds of various sacrifices, that's not necessary.
Right.
That's the thing. So there's scope for each, you know.
Thank you for that pastime, because I was just about to ask. Could you
heard
provide
about
some
that?
examples? No, I haven't, but I always ask. You know, I've asked this question a few times because I feel like I have some Kshatriya qualities and stuff like this. But I always ask for examples of what someone such as yourself, an advanced devotee, can provide. Some examples to you know how somebody such as myself or somebody else with Kshatriya qualities can establish themselves and make themselves of use of their qualities within the temples.
Well, you always remember that there's an element of leading, of being a leader and being able to take responsibility for that. And in every temple, I mean, it usually comes up. We've had instances here where it's necessary to ask someone to leave, you know, because they're a disturbance, or you know. And so, if you have a couple of guys who have that tendency, you know, they like to do that. It's always helpful, you know. So you're welcome to stay.
So, and one last thing just to put in is, I guess the takeaway from this pastime that you shared with us would be, it would be beneficial to not wait until something's escalating like that, to have the Kshatriyas, you know, ready. You know what I mean? We should have them, you know, have the foresight to have them ready beforehand. Right?
There should be, if you have that facility, yeah, for sure.
Hare Krishna.
All right, so I came prepared to do some recording of poems, which is not going to happen. But I can still give you a poem or two. So here's one that some of you haven't heard before. The Fall and Redemption of the Soul. Paul, you heard this one before? I think you have. You think? Where Krishna lives, felicity abounds. With pure simplicity and loving sensibility, all serve him with humility. But when a living entity rejects his true identity and out of sheer stupidity surrenders to cupidity, he loses all sagacity and with it all capacity to understand reality or curb his sensuality. Abandoning humility, he touts his own ability, forgetting his fragility and fortune's volatility. Immersed in asininity for what seems an infinity of lives devoid of piety, he suffers in anxiety till contact with God's devotee, perhaps of utmost brevity, awakens his affinity for words of the divinity. Perceiving the futility of all his imbecility, the soul regains his sanity and casts away his vanity. Endowed with new humility, he serves with all ability and growing spontaneity his guru and the deity. Regaining his identity, the wayward living entity returns to the fraternity of Krishna for eternity. So we're all in that reverse parabola somewhere. Hopefully we're on the upside, trying to serve the divinity. But awakening the affinity for the words of the divinity is the key. And that's described, actually we don't have time to get into it, but maybe next time. Those verses, how to gain affinity for hearing about Krishna. A religion is fine, but if it doesn't increase your desire to hear about God, Shamahevi hi kevalam. It's a nice little phrase. It means a lot of labor for nothing. So that's what we look. And when you're actually hearing bona fide vibrations about Krishna, like from Prabhupada's books, then Krishna in your heart, he purifies. Shrunvatam sakata Krishna punya shavana kirtana kuridyantakstoya badhrani vidhanoti, so that he cleanses away the impurities. And the most powerful of that hearing is Harinam Sankirtan, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, the polishing the heart. So we're situated nicely. Just keep it up. All right, we'll resume on Monday at the same hour, and I'll contact Yuval Kishore and find out what the story is. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Oh, please, yes.